If you've not yet voted in the World Zionist Congress elections, you'll be able to do that during our social hour cookie break. And there are people in the lobby who can help you and assist you in voting. And you do know, we all know how important it is for us all to participate in these World Zionist Congress elections where all of the voting is online. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone that made this weekend possible with my teacher and friend and mentor and rabbi, and our collective teacher and friend and mentor and rabbi, and the Tisch Fellows who are now Tisch alumni and rabbis themselves, as Rabbi Hoffman continues to guide and direct this program. So I want to thank everybody that made this possible, the transition committee, the celebration committee. This is really I lack the language as we were talking this morning. Sometimes there are moments we lack the language for this climactic weekend of my last year here. So thank you to all of you who have made this possible in every possible way. And I especially want to thank my colleagues. I don't know why. There are things that I'm not able to understand. I looked forward from the first summer on. I looked forward to every summer there was a Tisch fellow who was going to be with us. I cherish each and every one of you. I admire and watch you as your careers blossom, and you should all know that in different ways you continue to feed what I'll say deliberately the spiritual life of our communities just by your having spent the summer here. So thank you for taking the time from your own busy lives, your own work lives in synagogues around the world, literally, as someone came from Australia, but also leaving your families, which I know is not easy to come and spend a weekend with us. It means a great deal to me personally. I think it means a great deal to all of Micah. So simply thank you. So I'm also going to offer a brief thanks to my teacher. It's no secret that my rabbinate, and I think therefore our Micah community would not be what it is without your teaching, your inspiration, your great patience. I sometimes say to myself, I ask you the same questions all the time over many years because I never fully am able to capture what you're teaching. You're a person of enormous generosity. You're so generous with me, with your time. I just want to thank you for our deep friendship. I owe you more than I can ever say, and this Micah community is full witness to that. So, go on. A few years before his death, my undergraduate teacher, also a great teacher, and my undergraduate advisor, another oft-quoted sage in these parts, wrote the following, quote, Jacob Neusner in the year 2015. He wrote, I am nearing the end of a scholarly career spanning more than 6 decades, but nothing in my scholarship, not the history of the Jews of Babylonia or the sages of Yavne, speak meaningfully to the context of the United States. We have no historical analogy to draw on. And as a scholar of theology and history, I have no way to connect the challenges of the present to the trials of the past. I go back and I read this paragraph, this essay frequently, and I come away and I ask myself, am I supposed to feel lost? What am I supposed to do? Here, I think my teacher was telling all of us that the freedoms of America, at that point anyway, required that we somehow find a way to blaze a new trail in order to deepen and sustain a creative and vibrant Jewish life. That, I think, was the challenge he was throwing down to all of us who were reading this essay who cared about Jewish life. My next teacher, Rabbi Hoffman, introduced me to the writings of Richard Rorty, also someone off-quoted here. And Rorty suggested, as I think we've all learned this weekend from Rabbi Hoffman, quote, a talent for speaking differently rather than for arguing well is the chief instrument of cultural change, end of quote. We've tried to do that at Micah in many, many different ways. And that brings us to this afternoon. We conspired together to put our Tisch fellows to work for us, to do some active thinking. We invited them each to write a brief few hundred words about one thing they care deeply about, something that would be bold, perhaps even controversial. They were told that for each statement, I would offer a response to agree or disagree with what they say. Their full statements have been printed in the booklets that you now hold. So you should each have a copy of a booklet with the full statements that they've written. There will be more distributed for those if we ran out. So if you didn't get one, they're in the printing machine now, so be sure to pick one up. We grouped them thematically. Group 1, Jewish identity and Jewish unity or disunity. Group 2, Jewish engagement, including Shabbat, social justice. Each of our Tisch rabbis this afternoon will read a section from their essay that we edited for them. But I urge you to go home and read the complete essay. Yes, we edited them down. For the sake of time, we just couldn't have all the essays read aloud. So we're having them each read a snippet that we edited. Valerie Strauss, one of our editors, will then pose the questions that form the responses that we thought about that I wrote. I wrote responses to each of them. After each of the sections, we'll have a question period. All questions must be written on note cards and passed to Rabbi Crowley. And then after we go through the Q&A, which we'll participate in, Rabbi Hoffman will bring us to a crescendo as he'll offer his wisdom to conclude this part of the afternoon. We'll then go on to socialize over some good cookies, and we'll then return to the sanctuary for a musical feast and Havdalah that will be led by Rabbi Slackman. So again, thank you all for being here. And now we go on. Group 1, Jewish identity.
There is a growing argument. Hi, I'm Rabbi Kelly Whitehead. Great to be back, everybody. I was here summer 2023. So there is a growing argument that Jewish educational spaces failed our youth by overemphasizing tikkun olam at the expense of the critical value of Ahavat Yisrael. Critics who accuse segments of American Jewry of neglecting Ahavat Yisrael in favor of tikkun olam often frame this as betrayal. They suggest that a focus on social justice or universalism dilutes Jewish identity and undermines collective support for not only Israel, but the global Jewish people. I believe these values are deeply intertwined and interconnected.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Evan Schultz. I was here summer of 2010. Back then, I didn't have to take my glasses off to read, but now I do, 15 years later. My question for you, Danny and Larry, is about the impact of trauma and tragedy on Jewish identity. I worry that a Judaism motivated by external factors and tragedy become a thin Judaism rather than a long-lasting, sustainable one. Will a Judaism motivated by anger, hurt, and pain survive? The external forces seem to be drivers of Jewish identities for many at this moment in Jewish history. How do we process the pain of October 7th without it taking over our Jewish souls? What are the conversations about the Holocaust that we share that do not completely break the Jewish joys or the belief that there is still a God? How do we talk about anti-Semitism without it sparking a desire within us to wear a kippah solely not to let the anti-Semites?
Hi, I'm Rabbi April Peters, and I was here in 2013. Feels like it was just the other year. For those not on the mic, she called in sick this morning. As a rabbi, working both with adult learners and children, my questions are about belonging and community. What does it mean to be in community? What does it mean to be a Jew? What will the Jewish community look like in 5, 10, or 25 years? I'm not certain what community I am preparing them for. Though the foundations are strong, the Jewish world, and the world in general, is shifting rapidly. Divisions are rising. In my community, strong anti-Zionist voices and strong Zionist voices threaten our unity at a time when it is most needed. What do students and all Jews need to know to create and be part of a strong communities founded on Ahavat Yisrael, in all senses of the word?
This is working. Okay. First, I just want to say that I had thought about adding a question to Danny. Danny, would you reconsider? But then I reconsidered, so we're not going to have that question. There's several here, so follow along. Critics suggest that a focus on social justice or universalism dilutes Jewish identity and undermines collective support for not only Israel, but the Jewish people broadly. Are they right? Is there room for strong criticism of Israeli government policies without tearing down Israel? How do we face up to anti-Semitism without making it central to what our Judaism and therefore our institutions are about? And what counts as critical Jewish knowledge today that builds community but also stays true to the Jewish moral code?
Easy question.
Yes.
Harder ones later.
So this is a bit of theater because I wrote the answers to the questions yesterday.
What's that?
Okay.
Yes.
A few months ago, a rabbi who I know fairly well wrote a featured op-ed for the Times of Israel. Now, this is a rabbi who I know fairly well. His wife is a rabbi. I know her even better. She's fairly close. I know him. He's married to someone who I know well. And I know them well enough that they came last month for the Saturday Havdalah of the Grandpa Goldman pizza event. They didn't stay for the pizza, but they were here for the Grandpa Goldman. So this gives you a sense of my relationship with them. So the husband wrote a featured op-ed for the Times of Israel where he revealed he used the word anguish as a Reform rabbi in what he sees as Reform Judaism's misplaced emphasis on universalism as opposed to Jewish peoplehood and Jewish particularism. He wrote in this op-ed, this is a quote, "The Jewish people are a particular people with a universal message. Our universal message promotes caring about the others and extending love and kindness. Yet, our particularity keeps us engaged and informed, loyal and dedicated to the rituals, ideas, beliefs, and practices that reflect our 3,000-year-old covenant with God and one another." End of quote. I was tempted to write an op-ed in response because reading the full editorial actually made my blood boil. But because of our warm relationship, I simply wrote him an email privately. I wrote, "I wonder what this is an excerpt from a long email I wrote to him. I wonder what for you, what are the essential takeaways of Jewish teachings? What are the lessons? It is hard for me to think of any lessons or values derived from Torah teachings that are only for Jews or only apply to Jews. We do have a particular Jewish culture that includes language, literature, history, cuisine, humor, even religion. I see all of these as vehicles for Jewish teachings, Even the religious practice, however, is not an end unto itself. I see people actually with the most intense Jewish religious practices with values that make me cringe. I agree we want Jews to come into our Jewish spaces. I want them to take away such values as kindness, patience, courage, freedom, all universal. I wonder what you think. His response, quote, there are plenty of important universal values to take away, but I think we need to make sure our people knows what Judaism says, teaches, demonstrates about God, the ifs, hows, and whys, Torah. What does it actually say anyway? And what do we do with all of those 304,000 letters? I'd never counted the letters. In Israel, who are our people and what is the story of our land? While universal teachings, chesed, ahava, can all flow from these sources, we need to know what is unique about us and what we do to keep us so. Then he put in, such as ritual, mitzvot, holidays. I personally regularly think, I didn't write this back because I didn't want this email correspondence to go on forever. I have too many of those with you. I regularly think that such a response is swinging at a pitch that is not there. I think that's swinging at a pitch that is not there. My friend is arguing for a greater emphasis on particularity in Jewish practice. This leads to part two of my response. My guess is that every former Micah Tisch fellow and every Micah member that is paying even partial attention has heard me say that the Jewish mandate in our time is to, what I say all the time, is to defend the Enlightenment. I don't know how many times I've said to our teacher on our weekly Zoom conversations that I don't know what kind of Jew I would be without the Enlightenment. I raise this now because the Enlightenment values of education, tolerance, equality, freedom, democracy, which underpin and reinforce my Judaism, also, I think, need to inform our struggle with anti-Semitism. So here I want to make a kind of a pivot, that's the word, from discussing the controversy, or I think the false controversy, dichotomy of particular universalism, to discuss Evan's question about the sad parts, but here I'm focusing particularly on anti-Semitism. Because we are currently experiencing a new kind of anti-Semitic moment from which we can all learn. In a recent article, someone who I don't know but seems very intelligent to me, Zach Beauchamp. By the way, Emily, do you know Zach Beauchamp? Okay. Tell him I think he's very intelligent. Okay. In a recent article, Zach Beauchamp writes about the contemporary phenomena of pro-Israel anti-Semitism. He quotes Jelena Subotic, a political scientist at Georgia State University, who's written about this based on her studies of what she calls the populist international. Because my son-in-law is a political scientist, he was able to get off of something, the actual article that I couldn't access, which I read, that she wrote about this. And she writes about the web of far-right populist parties in European democracies that are on the rise that developed this notion of pro-Israel anti-Semitism. We have all seen this. Anti-Semitism emerge as a feature of right-wing American political discourse. Subotic points out how it includes, and now I've summarized this academic article written in academic ease, but she points, there are 3 points here in terms of what this is, what we're facing, and this goes to your question. This kind of anti-Semitism, but pro-Israel, consists of strong support for Israel, especially Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This thus creates pro-Jewish bona fides, so to speak. Number 2, they then position hostility to Islam and Muslim immigration to Europe as a defense of European Jews, chiefly by blaming anti-Semitic violence on immigrants and their children. / away from her article to us, campus protesters play this role in the United States. They are the dangers to Jews, okay? In terms of what they're doing. Instead of positioning hostility to Islam, the danger comes from campus protesters. 3, then, they continue to use anti-Semitic dog whistles, like minimizing the scale of the Holocaust or lacing speeches with Jewish stereotypes or, as in this country, performing Nazi salutes. This signals to domestic anti-Semites that the far right retains its historic commitments to anti-Semitism. We have to be able to say that the rise of anti-Semitism on campus is real, but the Republican campaign to use it as a justification to extend political control over universities has nothing at all to do with protecting Jews, and everything to do with undermining the Enlightenment values that have enabled Jewish flourishing. We have to say that over and over and over again. Okay. You're very funny. Okay. We have to be able to say that the rise of anti-Semitism on campus is real, but the Republican campaign to use it as a justification to extend political control over universities has nothing to do with protecting Jews and everything to do with undermining the Enlightenment values that have enabled Jewish flourishing. Hey, I wrote a really good sentence there. It was a little bit too long, but not bad. By the way, Tisch Fellows, isn't Temple Mike a great place? What I'm trying to say here is that the discussion of anti-Semitism and learning about it become moments for us to be able to embrace our Reform Judaism with great pride and to dig deeper into the values that we hold dear. And then Judaism becomes something that we can celebrate. You see, you get it, I don't have to try and repeat it. This leads to the last question. What counts as critical Jewish knowledge today? This, too, is something that I've thought about a lot, and I never have an answer that satisfies me, let alone anyone else. I think back about my own Jewish education from birth through graduating high school, and it taught me what Rabbi Hoffman was talking about this morning, how to live the Jewish life, essentially, of the past. I learned how to keep kosher. I grew up in a kosher home. I learned this simply by osmosis. I learned how to function in Jewish culture. I learned by osmosis how to pray simply by going to Shabbat services. I never had a class in prayer or liturgy until I entered rabbinical school, and then it was my second year of rabbinical school. You simply learn these things because you're living in this culture. And that so much captures my Jewish upbringing. Of course, I went to a Jewish day school, I learned all these other things, but I wonder, what are the necessary skills to navigate our Jewish culture today, to guide our Jewish culture today? What do we need to know in order to read the road signs? I've come to think the Jews should read, learn, study whatever is of interest to them. I really think that's what it is, and I think synagogues should offer ways to read the road signs of Jewish culture. So if you want to study Bible, yes, read Bible, and maybe also you want to read Midrash and Rashi, but maybe also, in terms of what Rabbi Hoffman was saying, in order to kind of think about new questions and new ways to read it, try and embrace the Bible as a form of literature. Read James Kugel, read Robert Alter, and then begin to think about yourself to use a different vocabulary as what I say all the time, the Bible is a work of fiction. And explore that in terms of creating, because fiction is uncreative, creating your own Jewish life. If you want to study history, find a period of Jewish history to read, and then find somebody else that writes about this period of history, and then try and ask yourselves new questions about that. By the way, if you want to read about the American Jewish experience, start with Arthur Hertzberg. That's one title I'll give you. I also think that part of the role of rabbi is to be throwing out ideas, as I've just do, and I've done with each one of you, for what people to read. Simply throw out names of authors all the time and help people find their own Jewish passions. It is very labor intensive. Now we're up to
Hi, I'm Rabbi Nicole Roberts, and I was here in summer of 2011. It was a good year, Ahad Ha'am famously said, "More than the Jewish people has kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people." We quote his words today as affirmation that human beings need rest and a balanced life, and that our Torah gifted us a life-sustaining idea and practice. But Shabbat, as our synagogues currently observe it, is keeping the Jewish people from other life-sustaining activities. If only our rabbis had the time and resources to develop them. Today's aching world would benefit from a redeployment of rabbinic time, energy, imagination, and vision. But what is our core business, actually?
I'm Josh Fixler. I was here in 2015, and I just want to point out, because you can't see it, all the former interns are like furiously taking notes as Danny is talking. And it's a testament to the fact that he continues to be our teacher. And lots of rabbis have interns, and most of them wouldn't show up in the way that we have wanted to show up to honor him. It's a very special relationship. We've heard so much about the promise of artificial intelligence and all it might do for humanity. At the same time, some say that it is becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish humans from the machines we create. In these dehumanizing times, we must remember that we are more than merely machines. Human beings are far more glorious and mysterious than any machine or neural network. What we need is a great rehumanizing project. In dehumanizing times, Judaism is a rehumanizing project.
Hi, I'm John Prosnett, a rabbi in Madison, Wisconsin, and I was the first Tisch intern. I also apologize because I'm also the person that showed Danny how to watch baseball games on his computer for the first time. So. Yeah. Without participation, we become more afraid and less willing to do the important acts that make a Jewish life. Visiting the sick, fighting for justice, comforting the mourner. We turn into a community where we overly rely on our professionals and feel more and more distant from others. There's a reason we need 10 for Kaddish, witnesses for a ketubah. Those are deeply trusting relationships. You can't be Jews in isolation. Are we building a climate where we can open our hearts and make the world smaller and more connected?
Hi, I'm Daniel Reeser. I was here in the summer of 2014. So I think that the weekly Friday night Shabbat service is no longer a good model for North American Jewry. The honest truth is that Friday night is actually the time in the synagogue that's the most dead. I'd like to do away with weekly Friday night services and instead do something different. Maybe every Friday we should get together for a brief 20-minute Kaddish ritual. After all, people there to say Kaddish are the main attendees on Friday. And instead fill the Friday night time with at-home Shabbat dinners, picture a Seder with conversations, and then once a month have a really lively, really musical, really well-preached Shabbat for the whole community. I think making these changes would allow us to broaden engagement, to deepen belonging, and help us to do something that our teacher Rabbi Hoffman encourages, which is to do things well rather than right.
Okay, Danny. Rabbi Zemel, here are your questions. What is the core business of rabbis and temples and synagogues, after all? How do we engage Shabbat, and how do we shape the human project to meet the needs of today in a distinctly Jewish way? And how do rabbis, without the resources that bless Temple Micah, look at reform?
I changed mine to look at innovation and engagement instead of reform. But I think you meant the same thing.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Look at innovation
Because I didn't want to use the word
engagement.
reform because reform, people might think that it was reform with a capital R's and reform Judaism.
You're so right. I'm
Okay,
so wrong.
so
Yes, yes.
What is our core business? Many years ago, after Rabbi Hoffman raised this question at a Synagogue 2000 gathering, he gave several examples from business world thinkers that asked the same question. I think I remember this. I think you quoted someone who said something like the following, and I may have, that Cadillac manufactures and sells cars, but they are in the luxury business. I have that approximately correct? I continue to think about that over many, many years. I can't tell you how many things I have rolling around in my head at the same time, and I'm trying to just make Temple Micah a semi-interesting place. And I then kind of translated that question into the question that you hear me say all the time. Rather than use the language of core business, what are synagogues supposed to be about and do anyhow? I still don't have an answer to that question. I'm retiring, so I can put it on the shelf for now. But I ask myself, what are we actually? And then I even wonder, when we're actually together and doing something that feels good and right and productive, I ask myself, what is it exactly that we're doing? Because I don't even know how to put words to that. And then I wonder even more complicated questions, because I also learned from this man, but I also read it from Mary Douglas, that ritual begins at the moment a person decides, for example, on Friday, they're gonna do their day so they can get to services on Friday evening. So the ritual begins in somebody's head maybe 2 days before, okay? So then I ask myself this question all the time. Not only what are we doing, but in the heads of people, you people, what do we symbolize so that you have a place in your head where you're going to think about 2 days later coming to services? What is the placeholder in your brains that we have? What do we symbolize? In other words, what are we? The traditional language of Beit Tfilah, Beit Midrash, Beit Knesset, house of prayer, house of study, house of gathering, doesn't turn me on. I don't know what it's supposed to mean, but I think about my own home. Buy it. I am very comfortable to live in a nice home. And I noticed that whenever a visitor comes either invited or unexpected into our house, among the very first things Louise would say is, do you want something to drink, or can I offer you a snack? In other words, my house is your house. Thus was born for us the oneg before services. Food is a way of welcoming people, but food is also relaxing. Food, and I kind of wrote this because I didn't know how else to say it, food helps us glide over whatever is awkward. It helps us glide over and create a mood instead of what might otherwise be awkward conversation. I kept thinking about this over the years and came back to the question, what is welcoming about? It begins by breaking the ice and creating a relationship. So welcoming Shabbat with a cookie might be a start. But years later, I found this. This is now a quote. Molson isn't in the beer business, even though Molson's plants are designed to manufacture beer, and every Molson delivery truck you see is full of beer cases. Molson is in the party business. Michelin is not in the tire business, it's in the safety business. The company's TV ads showed a baby strapped with the line, because so much is riding on your tires. You see, so Saul, I got you in there. Baby Saul's in the back. Haagen-Dazs, everybody knows ice cream is my favorite, isn't in the ice cream business, it's in the sensual pleasure business. Okay. So, Rabbi Roberts, what is the business of the synagogue? It can't be just a place to feel warm and welcome. Years ago, in an out-of-town synagogue, I was gathered with extended family for a bar mitzvah. Yes, Ronit, you were there. And maybe you've heard me tell this story. I was sitting with my extended family. Louise is there, my kids were there, my cousins all around. And my cousin sitting next to me during the service whispered to me, we are experiencing Rabbi as cruise director. We were all feeling very comfortable and welcome, but there was nothing that engaged us. So the question is, what does engagement mean? And I think we have to be thinking about that all of the time. Beyond feeling welcome, what is engagement? And then I came to realize that when I would want to talk about something that I didn't fully understand, that was hard for me, that might be complicated, but I wanted you to listen, I would frequently use humor to create a sense of engagement. Because humor can be disarming, and then it can be unexpected, and then maybe I could say something that was a little bit far out, say a little bit something, if it's not broken, break it. But I was able to kind of get intention. So engagement itself and kind of creating something complicated, deep, hard, requires some kind of invitation. The questions that you folks asked got me so thinking about what the heck I've been doing these years. So I want to talk about lack of resources. It was not that long ago that I was the only rabbi at Temple Micah. Rabbi Letterman joined us in 2009. Rabbi Manowith came part-time in 2006. So it's 19 years. So from 1983 to 2006, I was the solo driver of the ship. And I agree with you. It is impossible. It is absolutely impossible for a rabbi to produce a really meaningful sermon every single week, let alone 2, Friday evening, Shabbat morning. It is absolutely impossible, and anybody that thinks that's what they want to do, forget it. You're an idiot, and any congregation that demands it is ridiculous, and they should be told that. So the challenge, that challenge was for me the origin of the Friday evening handout. I always read a lot. I always read a lot. From the time I was a little kid, I always loved to read. I always, for some reason, liked to read books that I struggled to understand. I think Louise once said to me, the only person who really likes reading books that you only kind of half get and you're taking notes. Almost everything that I was reading was with the intent of helping me understand my own Judaism better. So I was reading for really selfish reasons. So then I thought, why not share these thinkers in their own words with the congregation and simply share the questions that I had about what these really smart people were trying to say? And that became kind of, I will say, a great thing on Friday evening. It wasn't for everybody. And people I know sometimes didn't join Temple Micah because they wanted a complete 3-point sermon. But the people who came kind of intuitively got what we were doing better than I got it. But I was trying, and I would always think, at least the people who are here would walk away with a piece of paper that had been written by somebody really intelligent. If you had the words of Neil Postman or Charles Taylor or Avishai Margalit to take home with you, maybe I wasn't so smart, but they were. And so Temple Micah could be a place where you'd either be swimming in the deepest of oceans that the world has to offer, and all of these thinkers, and there's a whole list of all these thinkers, became part of the Micah conversation. At a study group a couple of weeks ago, I think a person sitting here, I won't mention their name, said to me, can you give us your reading list? And I began to sit down, but to really type it out is going to take days, literally, because it is simply so much. Last summer's intern, Evan, who should get credit, Evan Traylor, who was here last summer, this gathering is taking place, by the way, because it was Evan's idea. Evan was walking down the block with us. Isn't that right? Evan was walking down the block with us, and he said, as part of your retirement year, why do you invite all the interns? And Evan wanted to come, but his wife is pregnant, and they're moving from one apartment to another this coming week, so Evan wasn't able to be here. But I give all of the students, the year that they're ordained, I give each one of the students, I send them, I get their next address where they're going to be living, and I send them 5 books at their next home address because they've graduated rabbinical school, and I send them 5 books of books that we've kind of talked about during the summer. Evan, who's not yet ordained, but I think he'd heard about the gift, he sent me a book bag that he had printed with the names of 10 books on it that I had mentioned to him during the year. So now I'm challenged to give him 5 different books. I don't want him to give him the books, the 10 books. But we read all of these people all the way to try and unlock what our Jewish inheritance is about. This is part 1. It's my long way of saying synagogues, and I'm just using the word, and I wrote this before Larry gave the talk last night, synagogues are in the meaning business. Life has meaning. Jews have this ancient inheritance that comes in this foreign garb. In order to make it meaningful, we have to understand it on our own terms. Jewish meaning involves exploration and unpacking mysteries. Again, a word that you used this morning. Part 2, music unlocks our soul. We all have a desire to be inspired. Ecclesiastes is right. There is a time for every human need under heaven. We need times to laugh, as I say, and we also need times to cry. We need times to simply sit in awe. A worship experience should provide opportunities for all. Those should be the goals of our prayer life, and music is a great, great, great tool. If, as our teacher says, Judaism is a conversation, we should try and form our synagogue so the conversation is taking place everywhere. I had a recent Zoom conversation with 2 Micah members. The purpose of the meeting was subject A, that is to be kept private. But at one point, I found myself saying, if you are a Micah person who pays even a little bit of attention, you know that my Jewish question has been how to shape and embrace our Jewish lives in modernity. Modernity poses such challenges for us. I have shared so many over the years, and they all come down to this. All the questions come down to this. I tried to boil this down to one thing as I was thinking. When I am home alone, and it is Friday evening, do I light Shabbat candles? And then why? I once discussed this as a sermon, but it's a question I have all of the time. All of the time. Whenever Louise is, every few weeks when she's in Harrisburg with her mother and I'm home alone and I've gotten home from Shabbat services here and I light the candles, I have a conversation with myself. Do I light the candles or don't I light them? And then after I light the candles, which I do light the candles, I can't not light the candles, and I don't know why I can't light the candles, I then ask myself why. And then I ask myself, I stand there looking at the candles by myself. What does having that as a question even mean about my Judaism? And then when the candles are lit, what does it mean? I think that in some way, these kinds of questions have been the ones that animate Temple Micah life. And I think a good challenge for any rabbi is to ask themselves, what are the questions that are animating your own Judaism? And therefore, use those questions to animate the Jewish lives of the people that you are rabbiing within your congregation. And I think you find the questions by considering the themes of the books you are reading over the years, and you ask yourself, why are you reading this and not that? What are you looking for? Micah once had very few resources. It was hard. And many years ago, maybe close to 20 years ago, I was asked at a Yom Kippur, asked the rabbi what I wished for at Temple Micah. I think people were shocked when I said, more resources. In synagogue life, you should all know this. In synagogue life, a little bit of generosity goes a real long way. And you should tell every friend of yours that's a member of a different synagogue. In Jewish life, a little bit of generosity goes a real long way. Over the last many years at Micah, we have been enormously lucky. Look at what our resources have allowed us to create. Few resources, always keep your eye on the big picture, what the future can hold.
Thank you, Danny. Hi, everybody. Cantor Isaac Sonodasor. I was here in 2022. Thank you. for all of the threats that our Jewish community, that our country, and that our world face, those facing the environment have filled me with the most anger. I have been thinking about whether this is really actually a newfound interest. A newfound interest in conservationism is necessarily Jewish. Undoubtedly, wonder is at the heart, wonder at the renewal of creation lies at the heart of Jewish prayer. And yet, more expansively, this is a Jewish value that connects us with all of humanity. As there is so much that divides the Jewish community and that threatens to separate the Jewish community from our longtime allies, our love for, and not to mention our dependence on our shared environment, has the potential to be the struggle to bring us together.
Rabbi Zemel, your last questions. When you look at the challenges of our time and which ones it is the responsibility of Jewish communities to address, what would you say is the most urgent today? And why is social justice so important in Jewish theology anyway?
Almost exactly 5 years ago, on May 7th, 2020, this beloved teacher, Rabbi Hoffman, shared with us an open letter that he had directed to that year's rabbinical and cantorial school graduates who were to go without the traditional inspiring ordination ceremony due to the ravages of COVID. I read the letter often because it inspires me every time I read it, and I've read it very often since the election last November. I bring it up out of my computer at least once a week. I read it because Rabbi Hoffman quotes or refers to one of my favorite historic figures, and if you've ever read an email from me, you know who this is, Winston Churchill. Larry quotes a great, beautiful book on Churchill and England in the early days of World War II. It's a book I highly recommend, The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson. In the book, Larson quotes John Martin, Churchill's private secretary, who describes Churchill's leadership genius as the ability to convince people that they were, quote, protagonists on a vaster scene and champions of a high and invincible cause. Rabbi Hoffman's letter to these brand new rabbis and cantors who are going without the majesty of the magnificent service where they become ordained as rabbis and cantors, joining a line of the greatest giants of Jewish history. His letter, in words, captured the magnificence of the ceremony that they were going without. He was reminding them that every single thing they had learned in rabbinical and cantorial school was simply to join those that carried the prophetic biblical message. And the prophetic biblical message, as he framed it, was to be human is to be a protagonist on a vaster scene and a champion of a high and invincible cause. Social justice, global warming, we are fighting a 4-alarm fire on every single front. Civil liberties, free speech, free and fair elections, Medicaid, poverty, hunger, public education, you name it, pick it up and go to work on it. Our way of life is hanging by a thread. The Zionist dream is being corrupted by a fascist prime minister and his messianic followers. Responding to all of this is the work of the human project. Why? I sometimes think that everything I've learned, all of Jewish literature, can be reduced to two questions. What does it mean to be a human being? And what do I mean when I say God? I think this is why the Torah begins with God and one person, Adam. Because as soon as there's two, there's mischief. As soon as there's more than two, there's murder. How do we live together with both beauty and justice? And God is the way we ask the why question. What is it all about? This is our literature. What we call social justice is embedded as the project of the human story. Now is the time to most fully engage, because believe me, the master of the house is pressing.
Are there cards, or were you so enraptured that you did not ask any questions? Okay, we have a couple. Mostly that. Okay, I'm going to take a few cards. See them. Okay. All right, while we're collecting cards, how should a young Jewish student, they're coming around. How should a young Jewish student be taught to answer these questions? What is a Jew? What do they believe? Okay, more questions coming around. I think this is you still.
Okay, so what was the question? Give a different question. No.
How should we teach young Jews to answer the question, what is a Jew and what does a Jew believe? Phil, I think your question was just answered, so I'm going to ask this. And then, what is meaning and purpose of having a Jewish identity? And what else can a Jewish community do if it isn't based on the voices of each member speaking out the ethical with their moral-ish imperative?
I'm still thinking about the first question. The answer to the first question, I think, is very, very easy. If you want your child to live a Jewish life, you live a Jewish life. Teaching your children is not sitting down talking to them and saying, this is what it means to be a Jew. And I think it's really, really, really easy. You light Shabbat candles with them. You bring them to services. You talk to them about what's going on here. They're going to get nothing out of here unless you're doing something at home. The entire thing is, if you want the best answer to that question, you can talk to Rabbi Zemel. It's simply not that hard. I think raising Jewish children is simply asking yourselves the question, how am I living Jewishly? And your children will live it and do it, and they'll copy it, they'll follow it, and they'll be Jewish. But if you're asking the question only about your children, it's already kind of, I don't know how to answer it. Was there a second question?
Just give us like 3 words on, I'm gonna frame the question in a different way. You talked about pro-Israel anti-Semitism. I think we have a number of questions about pro-Israel, not pro-Zionism, not pro-Israel future, and how you feel like we should be engaging in the question, should Israel move towards the direction that it continues to move?
Haven't I given about 10,000 sermons on that question? You know, for me, it's obvious the Jewish story is incomplete without the land of Israel. The Jewish story it begins in the land of Israel. It's looking towards Israel all the time. I don't know how. I do not know how we have a Jewish story without the land of Israel, and I think we have to do everything we can to fight the fascism in Israel. And again, a little money goes a long way. You've heard me say a million times how there are so many progressive organizations in Israel that are trying to fight this fascist onslaught. Just go on, the New Israel Front, Breaking the Silence. I mean, go. I mean, these are the organizations that Temple Mike Israel Fund is supporting all the time. Vote in the World Zionist Congress elections. You know, I said this to someone over the phone, quoting Jeffrey Canada. Our team is losing. We're losing. We're losing here. We're losing there. And a little generosity goes a long way. And once you get like, I get emails from Breaking the Silence all the time. It's unbelievable how they're beleaguered, but they are doing their work all of the time. The organizations, the New Israel Fund, Givat Chaviva, all of the time. We have to support them. What are we going to do? Walk away? Are we going to walk away from the fights here? Are we going to turn this country over to a bunch of fascists and racists and bigots? That's the same question we have about Israel. If we walk away from Israel, it makes everything else that we do kind of feel, I don't know. Yes?
There are a few other questions, but what we're going to say is, there's nothing new under the sun. You've given many sermons. You still will give many sermons. So we're actually going to hand things over to Rabbi Hoffman. And you can continue to send him emails for at least the next few months. So.
Well, first of all, I want to give my words of thanks too. What a wonderful Shabbat this has been for me. I just love being here. And this is no exception to the rule. It's a highlight in a way, because it's not only being here, but it's being here to celebrate one of the truly great rabbis in history. I often wonder if truly great rabbis knew they were great when, you know, I mean, did Maimonides go home and say, God, I did a good job today, you know? Who knows? We only know in retrospect what people say. By the way, a lot of people didn't like Maimonides and they excommunicated him, so life wasn't perfect either for him. But I often wonder about that. I don't think people appreciate who they are. And one of the great challenges we have is to appreciate who we are. Is that okay? That's good. I have to be close to it. Oh, all right. I got a better idea. Can I just take it off? How's that? Is that better? That's better, okay. So I think people have to appreciate who they are. In my experience is we don't do that. I mean, I wish I could say that I appreciated myself throughout my entire life, but in fact, that's not the case. Like most of us, I went home with doubts and fears and wondering what the heck am I doing here? I mean, you know, maybe I should do something else. I mean, that's just the way it is with people. And there's no reason why we should not be people, because actually we are. So the first thing I want to say is that this has been a remarkable weekend for me just because I see Danny coming, like Danny, I hope finally he gets it. I mean, Danny is a great, great American rabbi who should go down in the annals of history as being that. I know few like him. I know no one like him, actually. Other rabbis are great in their own way, I'm sure, and some of them aren't. But, I mean, you know, I think I love rabbis, and I think rabbis, look, some are great pastors, some are great at whatever. You may not know it, but rabbis are rabbis, and that is it's a great thing to try to be. Cantors now, too, because we now treat cantors and rabbis equally. They can all do great good in the world. Some of them, though, as I said, reach a certain height of greatness in terms of their impact beyond their time and beyond their people, and that's what Danny has managed to do. And you deserve credit for making him do that, letting him do that. For me to be just present to see Danny at this stage then is a great, great privilege. And so thank you very much for everything you've done to make it possible. I often say to people when I'm a scholar in residence, it's true. I have the easy part. I just, drop in, and then you point me in the right direction, and you say, go here, stay there, and then they set up a microphone for me, and it's all very nice. But somebody had to plan all that. A committee had to decide to do it. Someone had to decide to send out letters to all of the Tisch alumni. Someone had talked to me 6 or 7 times, right, to help me know what I would be doing. Beth, was she here? Where's Beth? I mean, there she. All right, she'll hopefully know that I said this. I mean, Beth, this morning I still can't get over how I said, gee, I'd like to be downstairs. Too bad we're not downstairs. She said, we can do that. I mean, she arranges things, and she's not the only one. So if you had any role in all of this, I want to say thank you to you. You were promised a crescendo, that's the word you used, at the end, which was supposed to be me. First thing I will say is a note of honesty. This is no crescendo. You heard the crescendo when Danny spoke. This is an aftermath, thinking about the crescendo. I'm not going to respond to all the things that were said here. I do urge you to read the fullness of what everyone wrote, because you only got a little taste of it. And you'll see these are people who are thinking and struggling and being honest about the world. And they learned that, you know where. They learned that from Danny. So do read what they wrote. I think you'll find it very enlightening. I won't respond to all of that. It would be a little here, a little there. I want to just think with you about what we've experienced this afternoon. This is not a usual gathering, Even for Temple Micah, this is not a usual gathering. So I tried to think of some of the things to name them. What have we done here today? Well, first of all, this is what we mean by Jewish conversation. When we say Judaism is a conversation, we just had it. And you can think about that, and you realize how Jewish conversation is about pretty much everything. And it's about our world, and it's about Jewish texts, and it's about you, and it's about me, and it's about our lives. And when you think about it, this is Judaism at its best, when we're having this conversation. We've even ritualized it. It starts this way, then it goes that way, then you're on, and you only get to speak this much, and you should read, and so on. Often ritual is the best way that we can have this conversation, and I just want to put a plug for Jewish ritual. I mean, that's what I spent my life doing. In other words, a Jewish conversation isn't just talking. Jewish conversation can happen in music. The Jewish conversation can happen just by sitting on Yom Kippur and thinking about what life is all about. There are many ways to have a conversation. You can even have conversations with yourself. Sometimes they're very, very good. So I think to myself, the Jewish conversation is the way we did what we did today, but also how we're in touch with history and how we think about our parents, how we think about what life should be like here, how it might be a better world, all the conversations we raised. And sometimes we sing about it, and sometimes we talk about it, and sometimes we just light candles, and the candles stand for it. But we had the whole weekend then, the Jewish conversation. Second thing I want to say is we actually experienced joy today. Joy in the midst of trauma. We've not talked too much about the traumatic moment that we are in, especially if you live here in DC. So even when I landed at the airport, actually I took a train, didn't land at the airport, but you get the idea. I was going to say the minute the train hit the tarmac, that's not right. Anyway. Yeah, that's right. And anyway, so the minute I got here, I said, oh, I'm in DC. Oh, there's the White House in that direction. Oh. And I thought, and there's Congress. And the minute that I did that, actually, my feeling tone changed immediately. Because I knew I was here at the maelstrom, the real heart of where things are taking place. And so we are a traumatized people at the moment. We are living through trauma. Israel is also part of that trauma, isn't it? And yet here we are keeping Shabbat. And we had joy in the midst of trauma. It was a special kind of joy, however. It was Shabbat joy. And we know Shabbat is supposed to be a joy, right? So I think about Shabbat a little bit, and one of the things that interests me a great deal is the rabbi's commentary on why it says it took God 7 days to create the world, since on the seventh day, God rested. So wait a second, it really only took God 6 days, didn't it? I mean, seventh day, God didn't do nothing, God rested. How come we don't say it was 6 days of creation? And their answer is that actually rest is creation. And that God had to figure out how to rest. And God figured out that the rest would be a Shabbat rest, which is not just you don't do any work. There's more to it than that. Part of what Shabbat rest is about coming together in community. And part of it is about resting because you just can't keep worrying about things 7 days a week. And part of it is to insist on fun, and part of it is even when you're by yourself, you light the candles. And the candles put you into a different place. And part of it is to figure out what it will be like when you rise from that rest. If you rise from the rest and you say, well, all right, I can go back to work tomorrow, that's not good enough. There is something about Shabbat rest that affirms for us the whole purpose of creation altogether. And that's the kind of joy that we had today. A Shabbat rest. There was also fun. It was also intriguing. And it also challenged us. And I walk away from this evening, it's not quite evening, I guess it's late afternoon, it's Shabbat. I walk away envisioned. Yes, we can fight. Yes, there can be a better tomorrow. Yes, our people have been here before. It's not the first time we've felt that the world has let us down. Yes, there's something about the Jewish spirit that says things can get better, and yes, we need to have faith and we need to have hope and we have to believe that we can band together and even trauma we can get through. And so I at least rise from Shabbat. Thank you, Danny, for your final remarks, which were exquisite for me. I rise with a sense of positive hope for the future that maybe I didn't have when my train made a mistake and landed at the airport. The third thing that happened today, or maybe I'm on 4, I don't know anymore. The next thing that happened today, however, is we experienced partnership. The reason all this worked was, first of all, Valerie helped with the reading of things and organizing it, and Stephanie put together this whole thing and did the questioning, and all these wonderful people who came from afar take their time. And I'm here too, but mostly you're here. This has been a crummy conversation without all of you. I don't think people give enough credit to congregants. You know, great congregants matter greatly. And congregants don't appreciate that they are really partners in what goes on. I think Micah people do realize that. And one of the great strengths of your congregation is that congregants are empowered and are part of the planning for the whole thing. This is really a dialogue between rabbis and congregants and staff and whoever works here. That's a remarkable thing. And that's what we mean by a community as well. Communities have different kinds of people, but I'd like to thank you for coming. That is huge. I think also we experience the Jewish people at its best. This is why we have the Jewish people. I don't know all of your backgrounds. I don't know how many of you people were born Jewish, how many of you became Jewish. I don't really care. It doesn't matter. You walk through the door and you're a member of the Jewish people. And so you'll participate in the Jewish conversation. But the thing about seeing yourself as a Jewish people is to realize that our moment is not alone. We are part of history. There were Jewish people who met long before we were here, and they'll keep on meeting long after we are gone. The Jewish people will remain. We have a role to play in history. If the Jewish people were to disappear, history would be impoverished. If there were no Jewish people, history would be altogether different. The world needs us. When we come together as the Jewish people, as I said before, individuals don't appreciate who they are. The Jewish people doesn't appreciate who we are. And when I say the Jewish people, I do not mean, as you must know already, I do not mean tribalism. I don't mean that we meet to eat lox and bagels or something else, though I don't mind lox and bagels. What I do mean is that somehow or other we do as cosmic importance. We have to appreciate ourselves and as a Jewish people the way we have to appreciate each and every one of us and say we matter in the long run. We matter personally, and we matter as part of this people that has been here since the beginning of recorded time and will help make the world a better place. And I said before, I leave envisioned as a Jew. But as Danny pointed out, as a Jew with a mission and a cause. And that mission and cause is humanity itself. I entered the world as a Jew, not a nothing. But I entered the world. And as a Jew, I want the world to be a better place. And that is the Jewish people at work. Finally, once again, what happened today was we re-experienced the greatness of Rabbi Zemel, which I referred to before, but he was at his best here, right? I mean, I want those words, I want to put them on my computer screen and read them when I mean, Danny, you are something else. You are a prophetic visionary and an insistent one. And you have taught all of us, not just by what you say, but how you say it, and the passion with which you say it. So we have seen a great rabbi at his best. We've also seen, of course, a great congregation at its best. And lastly, we've seen new rabbis and cantors who are on their way to being their best. I know these people, each and every one of them. They're enormously dear to me. And as I watch them, I envision what the world will be because of them. When Danny came to the school, there was no program that selected people to help them think about themselves as perhaps maybe being great. And the purpose of the Tisch program is to do that. And that's why we expose them to a great congregation and a great rabbi. But I want to say to each and every one of you, as I read what you wrote, I watched what you said, and those of you who work here already didn't have to write anything, but I know you. And I know that you would have written something too. And I think we are enormously grateful to you, not just for who you are, but for who you will be. And we have faith in you. And I hope when you find yourself wondering what it's all about, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that you're just on your way. You will eventually be what you will be. It takes time and patience, but never lose faith in yourself. You're here because we have faith in you, and we know the world will be better because of you. Lastly, what did we experience? Well, I'll give you one guess. Think about it for a minute, and I think you know what I'll say. We experienced God. As I said earlier, just think about this moment. People imagining the best, people committed to keeping Shabbat and joy and yet being envisioned. A whole bunch of us who gave up the day. And the belief that somehow this mattered, what happened today. So there is somebody else in the building somehow, and that's the presence of God. If we don't name that, then we miss the whole point. So I imagine that somewhere up in heaven, if there were such a place, it's also Shabbat. And maybe God is resting too. Maybe God's had it for a while too with the world and with America and with Israel. And maybe God is saying, like, oh boy, why did I even create this place called Israel? And I thought America was any better than this. I made a mistake. And so you know what? We have to help God feel better. And I think if God is looking at us, God is saying, yeah, if they can do it, I can do it. So let us go forth as partners with God, the great congregation, part of the Jewish people, a great rabbi already, great rabbis and cantors in the making. Let us go forward in faith and trust in the future, in one another, and in the great possibilities that remain great possibilities, no matter how many people tell us they are neither great nor possible. We can do it, because that is why we are here, to make a better world, and believe me, the world will change because of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been extraordinary. Just thank you. Thank you to my dear Tisch friends. And now we have another bold request. We are going to reset this room for the musical program to follow. So we are going to vacate out to the good cookies out there, save one for me, and then we'll give you the signal when to come back in for Havdalah. Thank you all so much.